And we are live with Dr. Maha, Dr. Nicole, and Dr. Daniela. Hello, doctors. How are you?
Hello, how are you? Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's an amazing that you are doing something that we've been looking for such a long time, having a learning design based on compassion. And Maha, you are Egyptian and working as a professor in AUC, and Nicole and Daniela are from South Africa. So we're very pleased to have international professors with us on board for this conference. So we're so happy to have you with us. Today you're going to present to us how to design the lessons based on compassion. So we're very eager to know that. So I know that you have a presentation and you're going to show us some kind of slides. And so, but first, please tell me, Maha, and you've been working for a couple of years together. So how did this all started? What did it come to your mind of having compassion as basing the lesson plans on compassion? How did it start?
Oh my God. So Daniela, Nicola, and I have been working together for a while from even before we started working on this particular project. We were talking about something related to network learning, but the term compassion came in two different directions. So I wrote a blog post. This is very interesting because I wrote a blog post related to Islamic prayer and how in Islamic prayer, the fact that if you miss a prayer, you can make it up and you different locations and you can pray alone or with others and all of these things, and how this helped my child pray more often because she could miss a deadline but still make it and things like that. And someone who is not Nicola or Daniela, someone who is in Australia, actually said this is compassion by design. So she used that frame to frame something that I was saying, and I was saying this is useful in the way we think about students, that when we give them things, that we keep in mind that they may have different reasons for not being able to do things, and they need different directions and different choices and so on. I came from that. And then I was talking to Daniela and Nicola about something else. And then we were in the process of writing about how do we design better learning experiences, both for students and all of us, our work is actually to work with professors. So how do we design better the work we do with teachers? And Daniela had actually done a lot of research on compassion before that. And so together we came up with this model. And Daniela, you'll talk a little bit about this in our presentation, right?
Yes, and Daniela from the University of Cape Town University, and you are in the Center of Innovation and Learning and Teaching. So you have innovation in your field. So you're trying to innovate education and go further to humanity and compassion. So that's really interesting. And of course, Dr. Nicole is educational technology specialist in the Center of Higher Education Research, also from Rhodes University. Both of them are in South Africa. Great. So listening to you, I would love to share something also, Maha, because the word compassion by design, I'm so much inspired by the word compassion, and this is where I have my page called Compassionate Educators. And last year I did a couple conference, and I named the theme as compassion by design. So I'm a believer in we can design compassion. It's not natural. If it's not coming natural to us, we will design it. So yes. I'm all with you on board in this idea of designing compassion. So
we were so excited to find this conference, and the person who told me about the conference is actually one of my students. So I'm really excited to be here with them. Yeah, and so just to let you know, this is going to be an interactive session. So if people are watching, we're going to use something called Slido, which will allow them to vote and contribute and everything, even though they're not here with us on Zoom. If they're watching on Facebook. And of course, if there's another place where they might be posting comments or questions on Facebook and you can collect those for us, Hanan, let us know anytime. We'll pause.
That's a new technology to me, so I don't know it, but
yeah. So you'll discover it. Okay, great. So ready to start?
Yes, let's go.
Okay, so we'll be sharing our screen, and if anybody wants to follow the slides separately, the link is here. It's bit.ly/compassionate and then LD uppercase 2022. And so I can put this for you also, Hanan, if you want to put it later on Facebook for people to access the slides. Oops, sorry, wrong link. I'll put it for you here now.
Okay, good.
Okay. All right. And so our first question for everyone watching us is, how are you feeling today? Especially with this pandemic, it's important, I think, to ask people how they're feeling. People can have highs and lows and ups and downs. And it's also important to recognize that I'm not asking how you're feeling so you tell me you're fine. We're actually really genuinely asking you, how are you feeling right now? And so if
when
people
they
are
say-
watching, they
Oh,
could, I mean, I'm going to ask you, Hanan, to say
yeah.
orally, but on Slido, either if with their phone, they can take the QR code and use it, or they can go to the website slido.com and the code is 3370271. So I just want to give people to answer how they're feeling today. And Hanan, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling so compassionate because I'm trying to circulate the knowledge that I know about positive psychology and how it's empowering for others to learn about it and to change the education as well, education system. So I'm very compassionate about what I'm doing and I feel good.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that. Okay, and someone said they're calm, someone saying happy and a bit tired, someone saying excited. If someone wants to respond in Arabic, I can read and translate that for Daniela and Nicola as well. Curious. Okay, that's good to hear.
That's a very nice technology. I've never used that before.
Yeah, I use it in my class as well, whether the students are online or in person. And one of the advantages is I don't know who's saying what, and someone's saying Alhamdulillah, so just thanking God that they're fine. One of the things that will happen, it creates a word cloud. So I'll say the same word, it'll be bigger. So you'll know that that's a feeling that's really common in the room. With when you're online, obviously it's difficult to see everyone's face and get the sense of how they're feeling. And at the American University in Cairo, we're still wearing masks in the classroom, so you can't see if someone's smiling or upset or whatever. So it helps to ask directly, how are people feeling? So I'm seeing only 4 people have responded so far, but there's still someone typing. So I want to give people a chance to respond.
Wow. Interesting.
To learn. Good. Glad to hear that.
Okay. To learn, happy, and a bit tired. Okay.
All right. I'll keep going, and I hope more people will participate in other parts of this. All right. Who was going to do the agenda? First part. Do you guys remember? Daniela, you want to mute? Well, whoever's going next.
I think, Maha, you're doing the start.
Okay, I'm doing this part too. Okay. So for today, we're going to do some introductions and talk about what's learning design, and then go for this to compassion and our compassionate learning design model, which has 4 elements mainly: participation, justice, care, and praxis. We've got a couple of papers on this and some diagrams that we use to help explain it better. So we'll take you through these and give you example. So I'm Maha. I'm at the Center for Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo. So my main role is to support other people with their teaching, how to teach better. Of course, during the pandemic, how to teach online, but just generally helping AUC improve in the way they teach graduate course. Daniela, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I'm Daniela Gachago. I'm based at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. I'm also an academic staff developer, very similar role to Maha's. We support faculty, academics in designing for learning, mostly blended and online learning design. That's our focus. We teach, we do research. Yeah, lots. Nicola.
Hi, so I'm Nicola. I'm an educational technology specialist in the educational technology team in the Center for Higher Education Research, Teaching and Learning called Churchill at Rhodes University. And I do a lot of different things. I look after the university's online platform, the LMS, and a bunch of educational technologies. But most importantly, I support the lecturers to design better learning experiences for their students.
Oh, interesting. Amazing. We all need you, Nicole. Life does not work without you nowadays.
Okay, and we'd like to know who's here listening in. So let us know what's your main role in education. And I think you can choose more than one, because some people are both, they teach younger and older children, or they are both a counselor and a coach, and they also do informal education. So let us know which of these you are.
it's a bit kind of whoever is watching, they come and watch at different times. So I think this technology works if everybody is attending and starting the live video at the same time. And some people would start the later 5 minutes would not be catching with us the live interaction.
Oh, they would see it a few minutes later.
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
Well, because I had asked Farah about that, whether there would be a delay or not, and she said there's no delay, but I didn't realize that if someone came late, they wouldn't see they'd start the video from the beginning.
Yeah.
They wouldn't come to the minute that we're.
Yes, it's okay, but it's always
they fast forward.
Yeah, that's fine, but it's very nice technology. I'm in love with it.
Okay.
At least we know who we right now.
Yeah, unless it's us answering the questions.
I am answering.
Yeah. So
how would I answer the question?
So what do you do, Hanan? So are you able to see the slido.com? Can you see the QR code?
The QR, yes, I can see it.
Yeah. So if your phone is with you and you have a QR reader, camera can see it. If you click, if you choose it, it'll bring this up and you'll be able to answer the question. Or if someone doesn't have a QR reader, but most people do. But if you don't have your phone or whatever, you can just go to slido.com and you enter this code 3370271.
Okay, I did answer.
Yay! Okay, so you're a counselor or a coach, right? Yeah. So it's good that you asked again, because someone watching might not know how to do this. Obviously, if we knew people might come in later, maybe we could have done another way of doing this. But the thing is, we're trying to respond. They're here too. So, all right. So I know you advertise this as something that's for higher education. So maybe that's why most people here are higher education. Okay, we were going to try to give examples as much as possible for the audience. All right, go ahead.
So we just thought we'll give you a very brief overview of what we understand when we talk about learning design. Some of you might be more familiar with terms such as instructional design, course design, but more recently, I think we have started to talk about learning design, which shows our concern about the learner. And so learning design is, very similar to what we just spoke about, the designing for compassion. The idea to design learning is to make it. Are you able to? More, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's about making informed decisions. So it's about externalizing our beliefs, our ideas, our thoughts about learning. And at the same time, it shows, we are moving from a more teacher-centered to a learner-centered or learning-centered approach in design. So we are less concerned about how we teach and more concerned about the learning experience of our students. And Greg Kono, who is one of the big voices in learning design, defines learning design or describes it as making pedagogically informed choices and making effective use of appropriate resources and technologies. So being more intentional about what we do. So not just using anything that's available or that we know or that maybe our colleagues are using. Those are important things as well, familiarity and accessibility and what our students are using, but also to be a bit more explicit and intentional about the decisions that we take. And by talking about it, it also helps because we can then share our ideas and listen and get into conversation with our colleagues about learning design. So the idea that learning design becomes a science, it becomes something that we can research, we can explore, we can read about, we can share, and we can get better at. It's a practice. I think we just spoke about that, this idea that compassion is something that we can get better at, that we design. It's not something that we have, it's a practice.
Interesting. Here again, we have a barcode.
Yes, we have.
It's the same bar, it's like same QR code. So if you're already on, you don't have to go back.
It just moves, it just opens up again. So, when we talk about learning design, we kind of assume that we have control over the design of our courses, and we assume that we have agency to make decisions about our courses. So we just want to, we don't want to assume that. So we'd like to ask you, how much control do you have when you design or teaching your course? Are you the main decision maker? Do you work with a team to design your classes? Do you have to follow certain guidelines from your department so that already, you know, your agency becomes much more limited? Or do you have to follow such strict guidelines that there's actually not much agency that you have?
Mm.
You can see for now, most of you are main decision makers, which is lovely.
Yes.
Okay, one of you is also part of a team. Okay, some of you also have to follow guidelines. So it's a mixed bag. So it's important to acknowledge that, because it's easy to talk about learning design, but we have to be aware of all the restrictions or limitations that we have as well.
I see that at the moment, nobody has to follow these very strict guidelines, but we know that in some schools, there are very strict guidelines, or some courses, even within higher education, certain things for accreditation purposes are like that. So it's just to recognize. Okay. All right. So this is me, right? So this aspect are related to changing the way learners can participate in the learning process. It's inspired by someone called Nanwehe Pehana, who is an Indigenous scholar in New Zealand, and she is Maori. And the original model was talking about how things that happen, you know, that affect the Indigenous population are often based on Western perspectives, and the Indigenous people don't have a say in how their work is done. So we've changed that model. So instead of talking about Indigenous, we're talking about the educator versus the learner. So if you start at the bottom left, the educator, even as they're trying to be empathetic to the learners, the educator uses their own sense of what the learners need, and they decide what is going to be good for the learners. So that's doing it too. Maybe they start giving learners a few choices, and they offer the choices for the learners. And that's a little bit better, because the learners still get to have some input. Majority of it comes from the educator as well. And then when you move towards the middle of that diagram, the blue one in the middle, it says with. And this has more recognition and more learner agency, because the learners and the educator work together to design the learning experience. But when the educator is there with the learner, designing it with them, a lot of times the educator still decides what that's going to look like. And I'm going to give you an example that maybe will resonate a lot with parents. And then a level higher than that is letting the learners do the thing by themselves, where they're leading and maybe the educator's on the side helping. But the thing is, even at the bi level, a lot of times the learners will still revert back to the dominant ways that they're used to being allowed to work, and they won't go completely outside of that. And so the maximum and the most agency that learners can have is as they decide for themselves what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, without the educator interfering, except to help if they ask. So if I give an example of the 2-4 with by as for parents of young children, when your children are very young and they can't speak, they have not a lot of agency, you create food, and that's the only food they can have, because you just offer them, this is the only thing you're going to eat today. You're going to get yogurt, you're going to get apples, whatever I put in front of you, right? As they get a little bit older, maybe we tell them, do you want apples or yogurt, right? And they choose which one, but the options are still coming from the teacher. The with aspect is when the child starts coming with you to the kitchen and preparing the meal with you. You can do that. You can let them do that. Or sometimes my child and her friends, they come over, I give them the ingredients and they make the meal by themselves. I'm there in the kitchen to help. They're the ones who are preparing the meal. But you know what? Even at the bi level, I've decided which ingredients and which equipment are available. So if I was to go to the highest end of that, to have them do it as themselves, then they would go to the supermarket and buy whatever ingredients they want, decide on whatever recipe they find online, or make one up, right? Without me saying, oh, these are your restrictions and these are the only things available to me. So imagine that analogy, and imagine then applying it to your classroom, and the difference between us thinking we know what's better for our children or our students, bringing them in, and the compassion being part of it is designing for them to have agency to decide for themselves. Okay, so here's another poll. Do you want to say something, Hanan?
Yeah, or maybe can you just leave the compassion continuum, the participation continuum for a second? Because Hannah asked me, Hannah asked about how we got into compassion. So
Yeah.
when you in the design literature, people speak a lot about empathy. I mean, if the kind of design thinking literature, they always start with empathy for the learner. And that has revolutionized learning design, because usually you thought about maybe learning objectives or content or, requirements from a department or how a course was taught before. That's how you would design your courses. But design thinking actually started saying, no, we need to start with empathy. We need to start with who our learners are before we even go into what kind of content or how we would design our course. We have to start to think, what are their needs? What do they need to learn? What do they want to learn? What are their desires? What are their wishes for themselves? And then to design solutions to respond to these students' needs. And empathy is important, and we kind of took empathy on for a long time, and it changed how we do things. But empathy also kind of assumes that we can step into somebody else's shoe. Empathy, if not critically reflect, or if not used in a critical way, can become quite superficial. I understand who you are, without really thinking about how am I different and what can I actually understand about my students. As an educator, am I really able to understand what my students' needs are, and am I the right person to respond to my students' needs? And that's why we started thinking about compassion. We started about what would happen if we replaced empathy with compassion in these design thinking models. And this is what I'd like to ask you now in the next question, is what do you think would happen? What do you, what do you link to compassion? What comes to your mind when you hear compassion?
For me, understanding all their needs, their abilities, their strengths, their dreams, their wishes, their hobbies, their interests, their skills, and understand my own as well. So it's like understanding who I am, my needs, and how my needs versus their needs can dynamically work in a way that collaborate in a way that have like everybody's fulfilled, everybody feels themselves, very authentic, and understanding when I say no because of some kind of need I have, and when I'm so excited and motivated, and when I'm not motivated. So it's an entire of dynamics of understanding, a high and a deeper level of understanding. So this is how I relate to compassion, of the designing the curriculum. I know who I am. So if Hanan is a playful person, I would include play in the design. And if some of my students are playful, they would flourish. If other students don't like playing, they will not flourish. So I need to tailor not all my designs to be playful, but sometimes maybe structure in a way, sometimes more considering different abilities of who. So it's a big dynamic of needs, understanding the other and understanding myself as well. So I need to be self-compassion too, and compassion to others as well.
I love that example. Thank you so much, Hanan, for sharing that, because that is, understanding who you are and what your beliefs and what your preferences are, and also understanding that might not always be your students' preferences and needs and beliefs. So to be able to be reflexive enough to say, although I'm playful, my students might not all be playful. So how can I learn what I don't know? For me, compassion is a lot about this understanding that there are things I don't know, and I will simply never understand about my students because I'm so differently positioned from them. I'm a white woman in South Africa. There's only a certain level or a certain amount of experience that I can understand from my students, and there are certain experiences I will never understand, no matter how much they will try to explain them to me, because I'm just too far removed from those experiences. So it's about becoming more aware about who you are, what your positionality is, from which place you come from, and then to see how that responds to your student, how that matches with your students' needs, but also where there are gaps. So these are just some definitions that we found particularly useful, when we think about compassion, and I think what you showed is it's not just about how we feel, empathy is about feeling for somebody, you know, or feeling with somebody. But compassion adds something else to that feeling. It's also about thinking, you know, it brings that kind of distance to reflect, to understand the distance between me and the student, and to try to think about how can I bridge that distance? Who do I need? Who else do I need in the room so that we can together understand each other? And then it's about acting. You know, I think your example, Hanan, was also about, you know, if they're not all playful, I need to do something else. So it's not just feeling and thinking, but there's also that act of there's an urgency to do something. And a lot of people, when they speak about compassion, also bring in like the wider system. And that's really important for us. We do not operate in a vacuum. You know, our courses, we are part of a school, of an institution, of a system, of a larger higher education system. We are part of a society. All of that impacts on who we are and what we need. So to also understand the broader social and political structures of our society, I think that's also really important for us when it comes to compassion.
Very interesting.
So Maha, I think you're taking over now.
Oh, am I?
For
Okay.
me,
So Hanan, we also wanted to know how much time. Okay, Nicola, I'll let Nicola do the next 2 slides, and then Hanan, we want to ask you how much
Yeah, we can
Go ahead,
still have
Nicola.
some time. We can still have some time. So just be yourself and tell us what you want to tell us. We still
Okay.
have
Go ahead, Nicola.
so yeah, we don't it's not just being compassionate for the sake of being compassionate. It's also, everyone I think has a broader, bigger project in mind. And for us, this is justice. It's not, and it's something that we work towards. We don't see it as something that, okay, I've been compassionate. Yes, I've achieved justice. It's always something that you, like an ideal or a goal that you reach for. So this is how we define compassion within the context of learning design. We see these 4 dimensions. So we can see we've got this tree, and we are really driven by this desire for more participative spaces and see participation as a process. And then a recognition of power and positionality, and how this affects our ability to participate, but also that of our students, and then centering care in the learning process. So you can see here, justice is like the apples from the tree, the fruits that we're hoping, when you grow a tree, or you're really hoping for some good fruit, but you might not always, one year they might get fruit. Yeah. And the sun is, of course, care. Maha, Daniela, do you want to add to this?
Is this a 4 thing? No, it's just 3.
Yes.
Justice, care.
The 4th thing is praxis. So that's the overall.
Okay. So what does praxis mean? I mean, can you tell me more about praxis?
The praxis is more about that commitment that Daniela spoke about, and that wanting to act and take a responsibility, and really that intentionality about more socially just and compassionate learning design.
I think the term praxis, I don't know if people in the audience, sorry to interrupt you, Nicola, I don't know if people in the audience will be familiar with the work of Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator. Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Yes.
He uses the term praxis sort of to mean action with reflection. Sometimes we focus just on theory or just on action. You can be an activist or you can be a theorist, but praxis is when you work and you reflect on what you're doing and you develop the theory of what you're doing. Sorry to interrupt you, Nicola.
No, it's fine, Maha.
So these are 3 components or 4 components for designing the compassionate approach or lesson plans or school culture. Or so if I can, you include the student or the educators as to have ownership and participate in whatever is happening at school, for example, or designing their own lesson plan to participate in it. And justice is trying to meet everybody's needs in delivering or in having this, and showing care as well, and taking action with reflection after doing everything. Is that it, or this is how I'm getting it? Or
Yeah, we were going to give more examples in more detail as we go along, given that we know not everyone actually has freedom to do all of this. So
Oh,
how much can you do within the amount of freedom you're given? So that's what I was going to.
interesting.
So this is an article of ours that explains the model in a little bit more detail. And the link is in the slides. We'll give you the link to the slides again at the end. So if someone wants to get everything out of it. And Nicola, this is you. Nicola, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm just wondering, let me know if you get lag, because my sometimes virtual background's a bit bandwidth heavy. Yeah, just let me know if you can't, if there's a lag or you can't hear me.
You're
So
perfect.
all good so far? Okay, great. So for us, participation, we draw a lot on this idea of co-creation of the curriculum, which is a process of student engagement, which encourages both the students and the staff members or the teacher to become partners and have a voice and a stake in the curriculum. So that's also a very much a global trend where people are recognizing the importance of, students as partners and, working together. Here's just a graphic that shows the different dimensions. Okay, and perhaps we want to move to the next Slido, which puts it into context and asks, what are some ways that your learners or students participate in the design of their own learning? And it might be something small. I had a colleague who, there's many ways one could actually, is it sharing a reading with the class? Cool, people are typing, great. And in many spaces, there are constraints that the student can't design their whole curriculum, right? Okay, here's one, choose between reading or watching a video. Okay, so how they would like to participate in a topic. Choosing a project. Okay, there's 2 on project topics. A nice one. They get to facilitate on a topic of their choice in a way that they decide. Reading options, choosing what you want to read. Got some fascinating ones here. I love that. Deciding whether they want to present, is it an essay or learning as a paper or a video or a graphic? Okay, so giving students the choice of what multimedia they'd like to use. Here's a great idea. We're getting some excellent ideas here, asking them how to contribute to the last 10 minutes of a class, how they want to spend the last 10 minutes, and give them options.
Okay, there's a couple.
Rolling in. I think we can move. Perhaps we move to the next slide.
Okay, there's one more person typing. I'll just wait until.
Okay, we'll wait for you. We'll wait.
Yeah. So before that, someone was talking about indoor versus outdoor activities. Planning, yeah, like students can be involved in the process of planning for the trips, not just be on the trip, but be involved in the planning process. Like, okay, nobody's typing now. We can move on.
Okay.
So I think this was me. So in the participation, right? Was this me? In In this process of participation, we're recognizing, as you can see, we've sort of talked about we're talking about where the approval comes from, whether it's more educator or more learners, and towards the end, it's mainly the learners, and in the middle, it's shared. But we recognize, for example, that sometimes the best you can do is to do things to students because there's so many institutional constraints that prevent you, but you can still do a little bit of trying to do things that you think will work better for students based on your own judgment if the curriculum doesn't allow you to make those changes, versus with things like that are extracurricular activities, for example, that are out there, meditation and grades and all of that, then there's a lot more leeway to give learners absolute freedom. And in between, there's all these different levels where maybe you can change a little bit. Some of the things that people talked about in the list of ways they gave learners choice, some of them were more towards the for and the with, because maybe that's only, you have to still let them write a paper, but you can give them choices over the topic, for example, and things like that. So the levels of flexibility vary over time. Do you guys want to say more about them?
Yeah, perhaps just to reiterate what you were saying, that often the buy-in as where spaces where the students or the learners have the most choice is often your extracurricular or informal spaces. Because in many contexts where, formal spaces, they tend to be a lot more rules. And even though you'd like students to have absolute choice, sometimes there are, especially in universities, there could be professional bodies. So a rule like, well, the exam has to be sit down. There could be a bunch of things that actually constrain, even though you might want them to do a take-home test, they do in their own time or choose their own topic for the exam. In reality, with professional bodies, that might present an added constraint.
Justice.
Is that me?
Yes.
So participation is our first dimension. So, and these dimensions are intersecting. So none of these dimensions works, or it's not enough that these dimensions work in isolation, they have to work together. So the second dimension that we believe is really, really important is justice. And that is, as Nicola said, it's something that we work towards. We understand that it's not something that we can ever reach, but it's an aspiration. It's that urgency to act so that we can reach social justice. And for us, the way we define it, justice is to understand that, who we are is impacted by our history, about our positionality. In South Africa, the legacies of apartheid, it's 20 years ago, but we can still feel them. We can still, our lives, our lived experiences are still highly different, whether depending on our race, on our language background, our cultural background, gender, our age, class. So all of these things impact on how we engage and how we can participate in class. So even if we want our students to participate.
No, it's important. I was just going to say, it's important to say that even when the teacher says, I will allow students to make decisions, between students, there are still power differences. There are gender differences. In terms of language, if you're teaching them in a language that isn't their first language, then some of them will be more fluent than others, or some of them will just be more eloquent than others, or some of them at home may be allowed to speak their mind a lot more, and others may not be used to speaking to authority in that way. And all of this will affect how much they participate. So
and also the previous schooling experience. What have they brought from secondary school? What are the experiences? What do they know from, how school is supposed to be? So sometimes you'll ask them to bring topics to class or to present in class, and they'll tell you, but we are here to be taught. So also their expectations and their previous conditioning and their, their experiences, what they think learning should look like. So there's a lot of, so for us, when participation and justice intersect, what it means is that we are trying to design learning experiences that allow everyone to participate, dependent, and this means that people will need different things to be able to participate. And, and to be able to do that, we need to know who's in the room. And again, that goes back to participation and to understanding who our students are. So none of this can be done on our own. It can only be done in relationship with our students.
And they're also different cultures. So cultures around learning. So if you came from a school where you saw learning as just passively listening to the teacher, and the teacher as being the main source of knowledge, rather than you as a student being required to do something to generate knowledge, and that you had that ability. I think that's also quite important.
So it looks like all of these are inequalities that exist in your classroom. Let's see if there's some that are more, because the only one that is not as prominent, it looks like, is race and ethnicity, which is interesting. Because in South Africa, that would be the first one that people take. But again, there's cultural differences, and it all depends on context. So in a compassionate learning design, you would look at these kind of inequalities and then think about how would you create a space where, for example, women can participate as well as men, if that's something that's part of your, the inequalities that you encounter. And you might not be able to address all the inequalities, but you might start with one or two and see, what you can do, at least to create a space where people can participate as much as possible.
I wonder where there's 80%, so 4 out of 5 people, where gender is an issue, but there's a small percentage. And I'm wondering if it's maybe a girls only school, and that would be the only explanation for that, I think, because otherwise I think gender is almost always a challenge, at least in Egypt.
But how interesting that disability is so high up. That's also very interesting. Well, thank you. Should we move to the next slide?
Yes. Justice.
So justice, again, so the intersection of justice and participation would then mean if I do justice to somebody, then I wouldn't, there would be little reflection on power and hierarchy. If I do justice as, if I move to the other side of the continuum, then there is a lot of focus on reflection, how power dynamics affect relationship between learners themselves, not just between the facilitator and the learners, but between learners themselves. And in between, again, are these different shades of participation when it comes to justice. So how do we co-create justice in a learning space? On the 4, it would be some reflection as educators respond to learners' feedback. The width would be a reflection on power and hierarchies and how this affects collaboration between educators and learners is seen as critical. And then the bar would be reflection on power and hierarchies and how this affects collaboration between educator and learner. Again, very critical and often, led by the students rather than the facilitators.
If I may ask you, Daniela, where are you in South Africa in this kind of spectrum?
Sure, it's hard to tell. I mean, South Africa, at least UCT, through all the student protests, has become quite aware of these kind of issues. So it's something that people struggle with and, debate a lot. So there's a space that has opened up, but it's a very, very fraught and difficult conversation.
Where are we, Maha?
In Egypt? So which parts of Egypt? Obviously the context changes.
Let's talk about Cairo.
I think we have, I think we have a very authoritative education system, don't we? But I think individual teachers who really care about their students find ways, even within this, to create environments that are welcoming to students and to modify according to what they find that their students want. In terms of talking about social injustice, I think that, and I wasn't educated in Egypt all of my life, but the time I was educated in Egypt, nobody talked about it. In AUC, as an undergraduate student, you could end up talking about these things, and and becoming more aware of these things in some courses, right? Like it's very rare you go into biology or a chemistry class and you understand about injustice, but you might learn about it in a history class or in a political science class or psychology, maybe. But as part of what we do in AUT is just try to let teachers know that these things exist and that in your classroom there is inequalities, and how do you make sure that everyone has the capacity to succeed despite them. So what do you think, Yohanna?
Well, we're trying to, I'm very optimistic. So I go with one step at a time. I go with one idea at a time. And if today's teachers and educators are listening or moving one step further, then justice is taking its progress. So we're open to the outcome, and we're doing what we are doing. And I think things are what I see now, teachers are more aware of their emotions, their needs, and the students' emotions and needs, and the dynamic of justice happening around those. And so I think it's getting better. It's getting better.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
a lot of teacher preparation programs are taking place, and more, it all depends on awareness. I mean, this session is great for us all to refer to the 4 components of designing a compassionate learning approach, taking into consideration what you have introduced to us today. It's amazing.
We're close to finishing up this part talking about care, and honestly, every teacher, especially in K-12 and informal education, I feel does have care. In higher education, it varies because sometimes professors are more into research than caring for their students. But the key thing we're talking about here, again, is participatory care. And there are different terms that are used by different scholars about this. There's parity of participation, making sure everybody can participate equally. So it's if you have a student who has a disability, are they able to participate less than everybody else? Things like democratic care, making sure everyone is caring for everyone else. And socially just care is about distributing that care equally so that not 1 or 2 people are carrying the bigger load of care. So like thinking about the Egyptian family, we know who's carrying the load of the care. Even if the other people are helping, but we know that there's a particular person who's carrying the load of the care. We hope that in education, it doesn't become like that certain people are doing all the care and the others are not. And then also that the people who are receiving the care have a say in how they want to be cared for. So it's not about the carer is good at giving flowers, so they're going to give flowers to everyone. Like you were talking about this as well, like understanding that what you like to do may not be what the learners want to do, right? So in terms of care, there are ways where the educator can anticipate what might be happening with the students. So we can anticipate that during the pandemic, students were feeling lonely, so we do social activities for them. That's a 2. But then we can do something for them where we survey them and say, would you like us to do some social activities? Would you like to spend time with 1 other student or 5 other students? Would you like to answer that? But then we can actually have a conversation and they can talk about their needs and rights openly and decide together with the educator what they want. But then you can actually leave the learners on their own to decide, and they can decide what they want, and the educator can just support them, right? So we can move across this continuum, depending also on the maturity of the students and also how much freedom we're able to offer them. And they can care for each other too. Like, by the way, students caring for each other, that's even more important than us caring for them learning to that active responsibility, you know?
Okay, so we're getting to our end. So how do we have anything more that you want to add to your presentation? Oh,
I think this is just a slide about Paulo Freire. And Daniela, was this you? Are you going to talk about this? We're almost done.
Yes.
Yes. So as you said before, praxis is when reflection and action and theory come together. So we, in academia, we tend to talk a lot and we're very good at, like reading and writing, but sometimes the praxis, the action gets a bit lost. So this is to remind us, that we can't just talk and we can't just, write about things. That's also, people see that as activism as well, but it's also really about the doing, the acting, and where it comes together. So where the reflection and the theory and the action come together. And these are just examples across different again, our continuum about how that would look like, you know, in praxis, when the three things come together, the participation, justice, and care.
Okay, I know we're out of time, so I just ran to the to the last slide with our email addresses, our Twitter handles, and the link to the slides again. And I'm going to stop sharing and say thank you to everyone who was with us today or who was going to watch it later. And thank you so much, Hanan. And of course, Farah, who's not here with us. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you so much. That's really, I'm happy to know you and happy to know they're doing a great effort in designing compassion in the classroom and in the lesson plans and the school culture and even in the greater culture of any educator. So if you have one thing to say as an advice, what would you say? Like in a statement, Maha, one statement, Daniela and Nicola, each one would say a statement. What would you say if somebody did not start in anything like what you're doing and you want them to go ahead and start? So what would you say, Maha?
I'd say listen. I'd say listen to your learners and create a space where they can talk to you freely and trust you and be honest with you.
Interesting. Thank you. And Daniela?
Yeah, I also would have, that was the first thing I thought, listen, you know, listen to anybody around you. And just start, you know, sometimes it's daunting to think about co-creating a whole course with the students. I mean, it's a lot of work, but start one activity. Gives, you know, we had these examples of, you know, just ask students to give you one question they want to see in the exam and collect all of the questions from the students and then pick 10 questions out of whatever you got.
Exam done by students. That's very simple.
Start small. I think one can start really small and build up on that and see how it goes. And again, it's so contextual. So some this might work in some contexts and not in others.
Like we often have lecturers who are very afraid with new technologies, and I always tell them just one small thing. And then you add and you build on. Next time you do something else, or you do something, you learn a bit and you do things differently after you reflect on it. So yeah, just one small thing.
Interesting. Thank you so much, ladies, for giving your time and your knowledge and your insights with us. And happy to get to know you really. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hanan.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, anybody who's watching it.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.